Okay, well, today we are supposed to be talking about another issue that we might not have tackled very well during the lectures, which is the theater of the absurd, and what we mean by the theater of the absurd. Okay, and one other thing that we are going to see how the plays of the theater of the absurd differ from the plays that belong to previous periods like Renaissance drama or 18th century or 19th century and so on, plays that you are already familiar with. So first of all, do you have any idea of what we mean by the theater of the absurd?
مسرح العبثي.
Okay, Masra, what are the features of this kind of theater?
Can I answer, sir?
Yes, is it Hawra?
Yes, Hawra Faisal.
Yes, Hawra.
It is the theater that doesn't contain conflicts or a narration as well as neither time nor place is mentioned. It's my serious theater, but it contains a deep underlying idea. And it's also addition something appeared after the World War in the order to the lives of people after they lost moral values and reached a level of attention.
Thank you, Hawra. Yes, as Hawra said that, special kind of theater that appeared mostly after the Second World War. And there is, that's not coincidence because after the Second World War, people were living in a vacuum because, we have a moral and philosophical basis for this society, and that was mainly provided by religion. But what happened is that because of the separation of state and church in Europe and North America, and the transition from religious societies to secular societies, and the role of religion that was getting weaker and weaker in Europe and North America. So the disappearance, or we cannot say disappearance, we can say the weakness of religion. The weakness of religion, we can say. Okay. Can everyone please mute your mics? Can everyone mute their mics, please? Okay, so the weakness of religion created a vacuum, okay, that was not filled by anything else. So what was giving human life meaning was mainly religion. And when religion backed off from public life and private life, people were living in a vacuum and there's no meaning, okay, because you mainly were deriving the meaning of your life, your morals, your principles and so on from religion, and then there's no religion. So it was kind of, as I said, kind of vacuum. So this is one of the reasons why the theater of the absurd appeared. What else, others? Do you have any idea? Do you have any idea of the theater of the absurd or what it means?
Can I answer?
Yes. Who is it? Hawra again? No, Hawra, I'm looking for different voices if possible. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, others. What do we mean by the theater of the absurd? What do we mean by the theater of the absurd?
Can I answer?
Zara?
Yes.
Yes, go on.
I think the absurd theater is again the traditional theater. So we can see there is no plot in the absurd theater, and you can see that in Waiting for God there is no plot, and have opening ending and the circle.
Good. Yes. Thank you, Zara. Yes. Anything else?
No, sir. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Zara. Okay. Well, yes. The theater of the absurd, or the plays of the theater of the absurd, always or mostly have no plot. Okay. And I think we spoke about that on many occasions, and we were exploring why there is no plot in the plays of the theater of the absurd. But mainly because, before we go on to list the characteristics of the theater of the absurd, we need to find out about what we mean by the word absurd. Okay, it's mainly a theater about the meaninglessness of life. A theater that tried to express or convey the idea that life is meaningless, is purposeless, is aimless, and so on. That man or human being is trying to find a meaning in an increasingly meaningless universe. So this is the main idea about the theater of the absurd. And the example that you have got, which is Waiting for Godot, is expressing that very well. So mainly, you remember we said it's a play about meaning, or rather, it's a play about meaninglessness. Okay, a play that tries to convey the idea that no matter how hard we try to find a meaning, to find purpose, and so on, no matter what, still we are living in a meaningless universe. And whatever we do is that only to try to evade or avoid this fact, which is that we are living in this meaningless universe. So this is the main idea and purpose of the play.
فصل النت يم الأستاذ؟
أي فصل يمل.
Okay, so as I've said before, this interruption, even in Shakespeare with Macbeth, when he was uttering his most famous soliloquy, which is tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time, and so on, and he goes and on, and he says like life is like just like a play. It's a poor player, a poor player that rests and frets his lines upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a story told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So the metaphor that Macbeth was using is that life is just like a story that is told by a madman, Okay, it's a story told by an idiot, full of sound and fury. It's full of sound, but signifying nothing in the sense that it means nothing. So the sense of absurdity is, or can be traced back even, as we said, to Shakespeare, and even back further back to the Romans and the Greeks. So what's new about the theater of the absurd is that now it's not only that they are trying to express this idea, but because in Shakespeare, although Shakespeare was trying to express this idea that life is meaningless, but still he was using a dramatic form that is completely meaningful. In his plays, there is a story, there is plot, there are full drawn characters, and so on. And so the play has a meaning, and it was trying to express the idea that life is meaningless. What is new about the theater of the absurd is that it's not only about the content, it's not only about the message that they want to convey, but rather even the structure of the play is formed in such a way as to make it feel that life is meaningless, or the play is meaningless. So, you know, when you are reading the play, it makes little sense for you. Okay, when you are watching the play for the first time, it makes little sense for you. There are many things that do not simply add up. So it's not only in the message that they want to convey that life is meaningless, but also in their performance, in their acting, in terms of the language, in terms of the plot, in terms of the story. They try to use these elements, all these elements, in order to show to you that life is meaningless. So it's not only a message that they tell you, but rather it is shown to you on stage that everything is meaningless. And this is what is happening in Waiting for Godot. And this is something that was not happening in Macbeth or in Othello and The Merchant of Venice. These are completely meaningful plays. They make sense, although they convey the idea that life is meaningless, but still the plays themselves are meaningful, sorry. But in the theater of the absurd, the message is about meaninglessness, and also the structure of the play, the elements of the play are also about meaninglessness. Okay, so we have some students who want to weigh in that matter. May I mean? May I mean?
Yes, sir.
Yes, please.
I think the main thing in the absurdity is, or the meaningless of life. People are confused, strange, and lost. Their life become mechanical, and the cause of the absurdity is people began to believe in the technological advancement, the naturalism.
Okay. Well, anything else, any of the characteristics of the theater of the absurd and how it differs from like a traditional play like Othello, for example? Now, if, I mean, you're asked to compare between Othello and Waiting for Godot, how are they different?
In the Waiting of Godot, the character, the end of the character are miserable life.
Yeah. And what about Othello?
Just circle of suffering and absurdity.
Yes, and Othello. What about it?
Othello, I think it's a tragedy. And just tragedy.
Okay, it's just a tragedy. Okay, thank you very much, Mamin. Well, زين العابدين عطية.
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, زين العابدين.
Yes. A character of the play of the theater of the absurd. It is logical, rational, the theater without conflict. Also, the theater without a plot or the logic.
Okay, what do you mean, زين العابدين without a plot?
No meaning, no idea, or no sequence and logical in the ideas.
Okay, well, anything else, زين العابدين?
No, doctor.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Well.
Okay, well, Tahani.
Yes, I think in that kind of theater, we find the language very simple, and
Yeah.
it uses our everyday language in a very
Okay.
simple way, and the meaning can give us an idea about our life and our daily routine.
Yes. Okay, good. So why do you think the language is written that way? Is it simple or is more difficult than, for example, in Othello?
Yeah, of course it is simple. And Othello, it goes like a theater with more poetry and more rhythm.
Okay, yeah, quite right, Tani. Thank you very much. Sara Hassan.
Yeah, doctor. So one thing, one of the characteristics of the absurd theater of the absurd is that the lack of communication between the characters. We usually find the characters talk less than usual, and also it is meaningless.
Less or more than usual, Sarah?
Less, I guess, because when we compare it to Othello, we saw a lot of soliloquies, a lot of speech, but in the theater of the absurd, we rarely find like a long block or a long speech. The only one I can recall is the speech of Lucky in Waiting for Godot, and it was mostly like if we hear it for the first time, it seems meaningless. So yeah, I guess that's
okay.
It.
So you're quite right about communication or lack of communication in the plays of the theater of the absurd. Any other features that you might think of, Sarah?
That's what I'm thinking now, but also like the whole play is full of meaningless words, meaningless speeches. It's all about it makes us like feel we're not in a play. I even read that it's anti-play sometimes it is called.
Okay. Well, do you think that this is because mainly Samuel Beckett is a bad writer, so a terrible writer, or
no at all? No,
why is he doing that then?
So he wants us to think of life as we're thinking of the play, the same way that when we think of this play, it's just meaningless. The speech is just meaningless. The actions also, there is no plot. This is applied to life. So he wants to point out some ideas, but in an indirect way.
Good. Okay. So yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. That's quite accurate. Okay. Well, Hadeel, Emad.
Yes.
Yes.
One of the characteristic in the play that the writer gives us presents the idea that not the uselessness of the time, but as the uselessness of the life. We can see that Vladimir and Stragon, being tired from their waiting and without any help from Godot, they try to commit suicide two times the play because they are non-essential existence. Their waiting increase their despair, and we can see that death is the fear and end of anything, and no one love waiting for death. But Vladimir and Stragon not only waiting death, but also welcome it, and think it's one sign of the absurdity in the play.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Hadeel. Thank you very much. Well, Noor Shaker.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I think the theater of Absurd, it's different from Othello. It has a repetition of events.
Repetition.
And
Yeah.
the repetition of the events in Act Two, especially. We saw that events it repetition,
Yeah.
and I think the theater of Absurd has illusion at the same of the Othello.
What? Sorry.
In the theater of has illusion.
Illusion. Okay.
Illusion. The character Vladimir and Stagon and the waiting for Gado, they are this waiting for nothing, waiting for someone is not coming. It's illusion. They are deceiving themselves. It's the same of Othello. It has illusion. I don't.
Sorry. Well, it seems there is problem with the sound. I don't know if it is okay now or.
Yes, it is okay.
Okay, good.
Yes,
sorry. Well, with regard to the plot, you remember we spoke about that, and we said that in traditional drama, plot is what gives events meaning, because otherwise events by themselves don't make sense. And we try to make sense of things by creating a cause and effect relationship. And this is one of the most important cognitive principles in human cognition. Okay, in order to understand something, we need to understand it in terms of cause and effect, what caused it and what is the result of it. So in order to understand these things, we create plot. You remember we said that events in real life mostly do not have such meaning. They happen one after another, but it's not necessarily that something happens and then because of it, the other one happens. So it's not that event A happened and then event B happened because of event A. In life, it is more or less chronological relationships. Always B happened after A. Okay. So in order to create meaning, we need to create cause and effect. And the way to create cause and effect is by means of plot. And so in order to have meaning in a literary work, we create plots. Plays of the theater of the absurd for the most part, and we are mainly speaking about Waiting for Godot, lack plot. And these plays lack plot, okay? And the reason they lack plot is not a coincidence, not like it's just something arbitrary, but rather writers don't use plot because you know they have an issue with meaning. Okay, if they are saying that life is meaningless, they cannot use a plot in order to make events meaningful. So in order to convey this impression that life is completely meaningless, they are not using no plot. Okay, so it's just like plot is a kind of construction. It's something that is does not exist beforehand, but rather something that we create. Okay, it's something that we fabricate. It's something that we make up. So in order to create meaning, in order to invest events with meaning, otherwise plot should not exist. So what happens is that in the theater of the absurd, because they are saying basically that there is no meaning. So we are not expecting them to use plots because plots will create meaning. Okay, so this would be kind of well, self-defeating if they are using plots in order to create meaning, and then they say to us and they say to us there is no meaning. Okay, so that would be a contradiction. So it's quite expected from the plays of the theater of the absurd to be plotless, because as we said, plot indicates meaning, and meaning indicates, well, indicates the contradiction of the idea of absurdity. What others have said about language and communication is quite right. One of the things or issues that writers of the theater of the absurd are having is with language, because we always think of language as a means of communication. We communicate ideas and so on by means of our speech. But when we come to reality, we see that only a very little part of our speech really conveys meaning. And the other part, or for the most part, our speech is just repetitions. It's just saying what we have already said. It's just saying things that do not have much meaning and so on. And previously, I asked students to make a thought experiment. Like, suppose that you are coming to school and you are staying in school from like 8 a.m. until 1 or 2 p.m. Okay, so let's say 6 hours. And during these 6 hours, you continue speaking with your colleagues, and so on. And if you, for example, make a recording of your speech, and then you try to replay that recording in order to see how much of it was conveying useful information and how much was not, I think, or I guess, that only a small part of your speech, let's say like 10%, was used to convey information, if ever. And the other 90% is just like the speech that you find in Waiting for Godot. Okay, so for the most part, we don't speak to convey information to other people or to get information from other people, but rather just like Vladimir and Stragan do. We just speak in order to pass the time, in order not to feel this kind of loneliness, in order not to feel this kind of nothingness, okay, which is, you remember, this kind of silence, because which you remember is quite terrifying for us. Like, we are trying to do everything in order to avoid this silence. So we speak with each other. I don't know if you agree with that or not, and how far you agree with it, but I guess for the most part, if you make a log of everything that you are saying and everything that you are hearing from other people, you'll find that more or less it's just like, or goes like what Isragan and Vladimir Ozont Lucky were doing in Waiting for Godot. So yes, there is a problem of communication, especially in the modern age. Like, and I said also before that these kind of technologies that are supposed to be connecting us to each other are doing sometimes exactly the opposite, and they are making us separate from each other. And one idea that really is important, and I think you might have studied that in poetry, in modern poetry or modern novel, the idea of alienation, okay? So when you feel that you are alienated from the society, when you feel that you are no longer part of the society, when you feel that you don't fit in that society. Okay, so you're just like an alien in that society, and this is a general condition of modern humanity, that this kind of alienation, especially in industrial first world developed countries. Okay, this kind of alienation. So like when Vladimir and Astragan speak, you feel that they are together, but in fact they are separated. And it's kind of paradoxical that at the same time they are together, but they are separated. That's why you remember there are no, or speech acts are not quite functional. They say something, but they do quite the other. One of them says, "I have a dream. Should I tell you the dream?" And the other says, "Don't tell me." And he goes on to tell the to tell the dream and so on. So as if language does not exist, like as if there is no communication. Okay, when you say to someone, "Or should I speak?" and he says no, and you are supposed to be not speaking, but you carry on speaking. There's no communication. Okay, so as if each one is speaking to himself. This is what is mostly happening in Waiting for Godot. So plot and language and the problem of communication are quite accurate characteristics of the plays of the theater of the absurd. Al-Zahra Badr.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I do. I can.
Regarding the differences between the traditional and theater, I think it had some idealism, like a complete word, a love story, or a conflict that would be solved at the end. So for
which one?
For people at that time,
or the theater of the absurd has idealism?
The traditional one.
The traditional, okay. So why is that idealist, Al-Zahra?
Like a complete word, a love story. This was what made sense to them. This was the meaning. And what I think the absurdists did is that they destroyed that regular meaning to make it seem meaningless. So in order to create another meaning, which is the harsh fact of a human condition or life. So that shocked society. So
yeah, go on.
So it was more like the old traditional theater was more like extroverted one. As you said, the alienation is related to the absurd one that became introverted. The character becomes more
okay. Yes, good, Zara. Okay, so well, that's a very good point, Zara, you're making. Could you explain, please, to your colleagues what you mean by extroverted and introverted? Maybe some students are not familiar with this.
Extroverted is like اجتماعي, and good. Introverted like انطوائي.
Good. Good. Okay, so you mean that characters in the theater of the absurd are more introverted?
The traditional theater is more like extroverted because there's always people. I mean, some connection between people. And the absurd theater is only like one or two characters. They're isolated from the society. So this was the condition for all human at that time, or everyone.
Yeah, very good, Zara. Very good. Yes, you can look at it in that way, certainly, that extroversion and introversion, although I don't think it's quite accurate to say that, because maybe when you come to Vladimir, he is not introverted. He is a man who tries to speak. Okay, a man who tries to convey his ideas. Introverts are more averse to expressing their ideas clearly. Okay, so the introvert.
I don't mean the characters and
I understand.
The play itself. Yeah.
The play itself. Yeah, that's more accurate. With regard to the characters, yes, they are not very much into introversion. So. Introverts don't like to express their ideas, but yes, when we come to the world that the play is creating and waiting for Godot. It's quite a barren world. So it's a world that is composed only of like four or five people who are very much decontextualized. We don't have a context to fit them in. When you come to a play like, for example, The Merchant of Venice, in contrast, you see now that we have quite a vibrant social reality. Like we have a group of friends like Bassanio, Antonio, and their friends, so on. And then we have families, we have Shylock and Jessica, we have, on the other hand, we have Portia and Aristan, we have like a Senate, we have the Duke, we have the court, and we have lawyers, and we have witnesses, and so on. So it's quite a complete, well-furnished world that the play is creating. But when we come to Waiting for Godot, no, it's quite a world that we might not very much imagine. Like we have four characters who have difficulty in communicating with themselves or among themselves. So this is quite something disturbing for people to really see and to understand. Okay, so because we are not used to these kinds of worlds in literature. Always when we come to novels, you see that novels present like not tens, maybe hundreds of characters, especially these 18th or 19th century novels, which are very bulky and so on. When we come to plays, we also are expecting tens of characters, maybe in Shakespeare and the others. And always there is communication, although there is misunderstanding sometimes, but things go on. But in Waiting for Godot, yeah, like we have four figures who cannot communicate with each other, let alone communicate with the audience. Okay, so it's quite a distinct, disturbing situation that we are put in. Okay, well, any other students, any other ideas?
Doctor, can I comment on the idea of Zahra?
Yes, please.
It's quite interesting, actually. When she said that the traditional theater is more extrovert.
Extroverted.
Yeah, sorry. So I think that because the traditional theater, it just conveys like kind of a whole life, like from the beginning to the end of the character. While in the absurd, we just find a few scenes, few days. Yeah, so we didn't actually know how Vladimir and Estragon communicate with people, as like we could see a few, proofs that they like Estragon was beaten by others. So of course he had a means of communication with them, but in general we haven't seen it. When like considering we haven't seen their communication with the other people in life, so it doesn't mean that it is introverted.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. This is a very good point. Again, we spoke about plot, we spoke about language, and another difference between plays of the theater or the absurd and traditional drama is characters. In traditional drama, you have full-grown or fully drawn characters. Like we have a character, as you said, a character that we know too much about. Okay, a character, and the writers were generous in giving us information after information about the characters. And as you were saying, and this is quite right, we're able to trace the history of the characters. We have a timeline of the development of the characters. You remember with Othello, I come back to that play because you are already familiar with it. Although the play, you remember, starts in medias res, in the middle of things, we don't know exactly how it started, like the love affair between Othello and Desdemona, how they met and so on. It starts just in the middle when Desdemona has already eloped with Othello. But later on, we have flashbacks, and we come to know through as many of you have said, the soliloquies, okay, or the narrations. They tell us things that happened before the beginning of the play. Like we have the history of Othello laid out in front of us. Like we know him, for example, he was general. He came to Venice. He was like so and so and so. And how he, for example, was promoted in the army, and how he became the general of the Venetian army, and so on. And then how he came to know Brabantio, and how he was always visiting Brabantio and speaking to Brabantio. And Brabantio was very much interested in hearing the stories of Othello, about his youth, about his captivity, about his courage, and so on. And Desdemona was listening eagerly to the stories that Othello is making, and then she was also taken in by those stories and how the relationship between them, you remember, started when she said to him, if you have a friend who is just like you, I would like to marry him, so on. Okay, so well, and so she gave him like messages that she is in love with him. So it continued that way, and then it like it led to the marriage. And then you remember this character of Othello that was laid out in front of us, and then we see this kind of strong figure, and we try to see later, or when we start to see later in the middle of the play, the weaknesses of that character. And we see that at the beginning, we thought he's a very confident character, but later we see that he was lacking confidence. You remember, he says, maybe she is seeking another relationship with another man because maybe I'm old, or maybe because I'm black, or maybe blah, blah, blah. So we see this kind of self-doubt, and then how he was led step by step by Iago to change his mind and to start to believe that Desdemona is really cheating on him with Cassio. And so we see a full history of the character, okay? And later, even when we speak, with the Merchant of Venice, with Portia, we come to know about her father, and we come to know Bassanio. We kind of have all that history of those characters. And so and although it was not given to us at once, it rather gradually, it was gradually displayed to us, but still we have too much information to be able to analyze and understand the characters. So they are fully fleshed out characters, like they are bone and flesh, okay, or blood and flesh. So they're not just skeletons. But when we come to Vladimir and Astragan, we don't really have that much information. Okay, and I, as a teacher, don't have that much information about Vladimir and Astragan any more than you do. Okay, so we don't have a history of Vladimir and Astragan. How did they start off? Like, what were they in the past? Were they normal people? Were they respectable, like they say? Were they kind of working people? How did they end up just like that? We don't know. Okay, so they're just like two-dimensional characters. Well, if you go back to Shakespeare and plays before Shakespeare or after Shakespeare, you see that we have three-dimensional characters who are blood and flesh. And this is one of the greatest strengths of Shakespeare, his ability to create characters. Okay, so, and people are like very interested in reading Shakespeare because of the characters, because mainly in Shakespeare, you don't have great plots. You have great characters. Like we are interested in Hamlet, we are interested with the character of Hamlet, and Macbeth, we are interested in the character of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, and Othello, we are interested in the character of Othello and the character of Iago, for example. And in King Lear, we are interested in the character of King Lear and so. So in Julius Caesar, for example, we are interested in the character of Brutus. Okay, so in his ability to create all these characters. So this is one of the things that distinguish plays of traditional drama that you are already familiar with from plays of the theater of the absurd. So that's quite a good point, Zahra and Sarah. Well, any other things, students, you want to add about how plays of the theater of the absurd are different from traditional plays?
Sir,
Noor,
I want
yes?
to ask you.
Yes,
I
go
want
on.
to ask about something. Do you think the waiting for Godot is more reality than Othello? Othello, it has exaggeration in the events.
Like how exaggeration?
Exaggerate, يعني someone tell you that your wife is cheating you and then killing her without يعني ماكو دليل without يعني
No,
ماكو دليل.
I think Iago was giving one evidence after another. Like, yeah, they might not be very much convincing, but he was giving pieces of evidence.
Yes.
Yeah, and you remember this logic. You remember when he said to him, and this kind of evidence started with Brabantio when he said to Othello, "Look at her more, thou hast eyes to see. She deceived her father and might thee." Okay, so and she's a woman who deceived her father. It's quite likely that she would deceive her husband. Okay, you remember that piece of evidence which we kind of discussed extensively in year 2. You might not find it convincing, but it kind of plants a seed of doubt in the mind of Othello and others when Cassio was speaking with Desdemona, although he was not speaking love to Desdemona, he was just begging her to recommend him for Othello to return him to his job and so on. Okay, so although these piles of evidence were not conclusive each by itself, but when you group them together, it makes a very good case for cheating. Okay, so there is exaggeration, you're right, in terms of the language. I said before that you remember that people in real life don't speak like they do in Othello, but rather more like they do in Waiting for Godot. So mostly Waiting for Godot is more realistic in terms of the language than Othello or any other Shakespearean play, because Shakespeare dialogue is written in poetry, and I don't think in the history of humanity, at any period of the history of humanity, did humans exchange ideas in poetry. I don't think that. Any other thing? Any other ideas that you might want to express? If you have any questions about that topic.
Sir, you say that you don't know about the past of the character. I think we also don't know about the future of the character. For example, Bozo and Lecky travel without clear aim. We don't know where they will go.
Good,
also,
yes, good.
Also, Vladimir and Estragon travel in circle. Just after days' journey, they return to where they began. They don't know what they know to do in the future.
Yeah, well,
there's no plan.
Yes. Well, anything else, Hadeel?
No.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this is something also that is also related to something that we already talked about, which is like you remember with traditional drama we have ends, okay, clear ends, clear cut ends, like things end here, and you remember, like we said, even in Shakespeare, for example, ends are not very much conclusive, and Shakespeare sometimes was leaving loose ends for us to follow, even with the by the end of the play. But at least there is an end. So at the end of Othello kills Desdemona and kills himself, and Iago is going to be brought to court, okay, in order to be punished for what he did. By the end of the Merchant of Venice, for example, we have an end with Antonio, for example, restoring his fortune, with Bassanio and Portia are already married and living happily ever after, and we have the dissatisfying and only for Shylock, who was like forced to convert to Christianity and to donate his money to the state, half of it to the state, and half the other half maybe to Antonio. So, but still, there are ends, no matter how loose they are. But in the plays of the theater of the absurd, we said there are no ends, and that's why you say we don't know the future. Okay, so maybe if we contemplate about the Merchant of Venice, we can contemplate about Portia and Bassanio having children, Shylock maybe receding to the margins of life in Venice, or maybe he would leave Venice after all, or Antonio might continue, or we might imagine Antonio going on with his trade, thriving, so on. So we can imagine things by the end of the play, and so the case with Othello. But with Waiting for Godot, it's difficult, and maybe because paradoxical, kind of difficult and easy at the same time, because we can expect Vladimir Anstragan to be coming also the next day and waiting and maybe speaking about more or less the same things, and that's it. So maybe if there is an Act 3 and Act 4, for example, in Waiting for Godot, we'd not expect them to be different that much from Act 1 and Act 2. So I also would imagine that by the end of Act 3 in Waiting for Godot, a boy, maybe the same boy or some different boy, comes in and tells them that Mr. Godot is not able to come tonight, and certainly he's coming tomorrow. And so by the end they say, let's go, and they don't move. And also by the end of Act 4, the same or a different boy also would be coming in, telling them exactly the same message, and then they would react in exactly the same thing. So it's kind of predictable in that way, but we don't know what they are. Okay, we don't know what they shall be. Okay, maybe after 1 year or after 2 years, we cannot imagine them just like that. So yes, you are right about imagining the future, but you have to relate that to another thing that we spoke about with regard to the play, which is, you remember we said in plays of the theater or the absurd, we have cyclical movement, like we start from one point and return to the same point, just like in when you are drawing a circle. But in traditional plays, we have a linear movement. We from one point to the other. Like what Al-Zahra. Al-Zahra, do you want to say something? Okay, others, any other students, before we finish this lecture, do you have anything to say or to ask about this topic?
Okay. I wanna
Yes,
comment
Sarah.
about the ending of the absurd theater. It's usually by committing suicide. I've read like there is a theater or like a play is called The Chairs. And the theater, the characters at the end of the play commit suicide. And so the case in Waiting for God, it's the same. They always think of committing suicide and stuff like that. So can we also consider this as an ending for the absurd theater?
Yes, it could be. Of course, when we speak about Waiting for Godot, not all the plays of the theater of the absurd are exactly like Waiting for Godot, but it's kind of the most famous, the most prototypical play in this tradition of the theater of the absurd. Yes, there can be an ending in that, and there are many other plays that also in which characters contemplate suicide, and sometimes they do really commit suicide. Any other question or any other comment? Zahra?
Sorry, my internet connection was not stable.
It's okay, don't worry.
So regarding the use of a humor or comedy, so in the absurd theater, it's more like a dark humor and bitter one. And in the traditional one, like in Othello, there is comic relief. Like there's a whole scene for
yeah,
yeah.
right, yeah. Yes, you remember we said that in the plays of the theater of the absurd, comedy is not separate really from tragedy. Things are comic mainly because they are tragic, and they are tragic because they are comic. And I guess there is a saying that history repeats itself, first as tragedy and then as a farce. Okay, so like everything is repetition or for a certain precedent. So yes, in the plays of the theater of the absurd, and I'm mainly speaking here about Waiting for Godot. You remember we call them tragic comedies or humorous tragedies. They are tragic, but the tragedy of life is not taken seriously. Like life's tragedy, and you cannot take it seriously because no matter how seriously you take it, you cannot change it. Okay, so the best reaction to it is kind of saying that or treating it as a comedy. Okay, so not to care that much about it. And it is comic in the same time that it is tragic. So these things cannot be separated from each other. Like we have a human condition, that human condition is very, very severe, very unbearable, okay? But it's quite tragic. What the most appropriate response for that situation is to take it easy, okay? So this is what mainly Vladimir and Estragan are doing, because no matter how serious you try to be, things are not going to change. So this is the point, I think. Any other question or comment?
I have an addition.
Yes, Mary.
About the character of the absurdity. The life can be compared with that of a prisoner for whom there is no escape. Even suicide is impossible.
God, yeah.
Example, the Vladimir and the Stragon, we can represent them as man in general, facing the problems of his existence in this world.
Yes, that's a good metaphor. I mean, I don't know if you've like crafted this metaphor or something that you've read somewhere else, life or like comparing life to a prison, and this is quite revealing, and I sometimes use that metaphor myself when I speak about life. So yes, they are like prisoners, and if you go and look, for example, to movies that prisons, like you remember one series, great series, Prison Break, if you are familiar with it, and another one, for example, the Shawshank Redemption, and many other movies or stories that speak about prisons and so on. And when you go into that and you see that prison represents a fully fledged life and so on. So you can say, for example, that prison is just like life, and you can make it the other way around and say that life itself is just like a prison. So yes, it's quite interesting and disturbing at the same time. Like even when they are trying to take away their lives, they're not able to do so. Like with, for example, with suicide. Yeah. Sara Shaker.
Yeah. Waiting for Godot, do not use a dream or fantasy like some of the plays.
Yeah.
Yeah, we see the situation almost unchanged, the same place, same time. So two characters waiting for nothing, or let's say
yes,
waiting for someone. It's absurd thing. They already know that their waiting will not end it. It seems that all the world waiting for something, and we're not sure of this thing. So this make it ridiculous.
Good. And compared to traditional drama, how is that different from traditional drama? Noor, sorry, Sarah.
You mean?
Yeah, plays the Waiting for Godot. If you, for example, compare it with Othello, is it the same thing happening in Othello, or it is different?
Yeah, in Othello, like I said, Waiting for Godot do not use that dreams or fantasy or these things. In Othello, we can say these things.
Okay. Yeah.
In Waiting for Godot, these things are.
Okay. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you. I've got your point. Thank you very much. Okay. So students, we have to stop here. Okay, and continue in the next lecture. The next lecture will be kind of a review for what we have been saying during this course. And if you have any questions or comments to make about the issues that we have been discussing, please try to gather them for the next lecture and try to raise them then later. Okay, so thank you very much and have a good time.